Hi. Can you hear me okay? Oh, it works. Brilliant. Right, first things first, photograph. May I take a photo of you and post it on Blue Sky? Used to be Twitter. Now it's Blue Sky. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Oop. Brilliant. And a selfie? Is that allowed? I do this sort of thing all the time, right? Come on, wave, give me a wave, give me a wave. There you go. Oh, thanks. Wow, hello. Thank you so much for having me here today. What an absolute honour and a pleasure to be a part of such a fantastic event. And thank you for saying legend. I thought we were joking backstage about that. What a brilliant day. I can't believe it's gone so fast. I've loved the talks. I think I'm the warm-up act for the main event, Seb and the laser show later. I'm very much looking forward to that. So I have no lasers, unfortunately, but I'm going to talk to you about design maturity. Just to be clear here, design maturity and how to have impact. Not necessarily saying, here's a spoiler, not necessarily saying that those two things are connected as such. I'm going to talk a bit about my experience of building user-centered design team, a community and a capability at one of the most complex and large and hierarchical of the government departments, the Home Office. And I'm mainly going to tell you a bit about my design maturity journey as I grew design capability in the department. And so it's a little bit of a retrospective. I figured Madonna's got her celebration tour, came to an end this week. So this is my kind of retrospective tour of my time at the Home Office, and I promise I won't talk about it anymore after that. So if you're new to my work, then this is a kind of a rendition of my back catalogue. You can dip into the archives later, but if you've been here before, then I hope you enjoyed the ride. All right, so design maturity. Oh, it's about user-centered design, just checking you all know that. And about, I guess, the kind of the discipline, the specialisms of user-centered design. I'm a user researcher by trade, that's my specialism. However, if you have worked in a sufficiently mature digital capability, capacity, or a sufficiently mature digital organization, I think this will have resonance. Let me have your feedback. I've put Blue Sky and LinkedIn handles up there, so and I'll be at the drinks later, so I'd be really interested to know what you think. Okay, so design maturity. So I'm not alone in thinking about design maturity and what it means and how to get it and how to help organizations improve theirs. Quick search on a search engine reveals a kind of a plethora of like tables and charts and scales and models and levels and ladders. Everyone's thinking about it, and they exist for things like accessibility, for digital, for agility, for user research, and they're all, as I say, focused on improving the maturity of the organizations that we work with and for. In government, these are being used a bit more frequently. So this is the one from the Land Registry, where they kind of talk, I think a couple of years ago, 2021, they talk about design being a mindset as well as a collection of skills. This is one from the brilliant team over at NHS. They were NHS Digital when this was created in the NHS England. I like this one because it uses the language isn't particularly loaded, and it's got these kind of, that progression from no design up to designer's strategy, which is where, design is informing kind of the organizational direction as well as being used in the creation of products and services. This is one we made at the Home Office. There's a kind of a maturity model, there's a self-assessment tool, a number of kind of indicators that we used, and me and my team put this together around 2020, and that was about the time that I got my latest and final promotion in the department and became a senior civil servant. And I was given the objective of making the department more design-led. And that meant like engaging with some of these really kind of quite serious program directors and portfolio directors across the department. And I have to say, I found the prospect a bit challenging. And so that's when I turned to a design maturity model. And it was designed to be, especially to be light touch. And the reason for that was that I cared less about the rigor of the assessment than I did about the quality of the conversation and beginning a conversation with these individuals and then keeping it going. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So we're going to this is the academic section of the talk. It gets more fun later. I won't have lasers, but it does get more fun. So we're just going to really quickly whiz through some maturity models because I think it's quite interesting. Okay, earliest example is the design ladder. It was produced for the Danish Design Council by Kretschmar in 2003. And it talked about it being a way to categorize the different levels of influence that design has within an organization, within a business. At the final step, again, you've got designer's strategy where the management executive level management of the organization is intrinsically involved in the design process. That's what you're striving to as the peak of maturity. I like this one because it shows the different levels, but in a non-hierarchical way. Again, though, where you've got the most mature organizations is where design is integral to all aspects of the organization. Here's another one. This is from UXPA, so not particularly academic one, but from a UX thought leader in 2010. Again, you've got this progression up a ladder, up a scale to a corporation that is customer driven. Okay, a couple more, and then we'll get fun, I promise. So. Some of the most influential in the UX industry have been looking at this, and they've been using some quite striking language. I thought this is an early one from Jacob Nielsen. Talks about first stage is where there is hostility towards usability and where you might find developers in the room, talking about a good user is a dead user. I know, right? And the Neanderthal attitudes of companies and management that don't understand or appreciate the value of user-centered design. Nielsen's matured his model since then, but the reference to hostility still remains. And again, talks about the primary obstacle to maturity in an organization is education. So people need to be educated. Here's another one with interesting language. So Thomas Sharon, awesome guy, talking, so this was his from 2012, and essentially the intent behind this model was to help people understand whether they should fight for UX or flee by quitting, because it's not worth it, you're not going to make any progress. So fight or flee. Okay. Now, I like Jared's lens on this, Jared Spool. Now, that is a true legend, who his lens is that a company, an organization has reached a sufficient level of maturity when people who don't think of themselves as designers begin to make informed design decisions. So they know enough about, the design process to begin to apply it themselves. And that's, and that's kind of what you're aiming for. But even he talks about the dark ages. So the first stage is, the dark ages where there's no design at all. Okay, so in summary, almost all of the maturity models that I took a look at talk about levels and scales and ladders, and they're all there to kind of help organizations benchmark their maturity and make progress and track their progress towards greater maturity. And they're all agreed that this is basically what good looks like. A mature organization is when design is integral to how that organization works. There's expertise at scale and in multiple places, as well as at exec level. Sophisticated feedback loops, non-designers, like we were just saying, applying proven design methods, genuine collaboration and co-creation, but to solve organizational challenges as well as product and service challenges. So, I think they're quite a good thing. There is quite an interesting critique kind of growing out there. People like Erica Hall who are talking about the kind of, in some ways, all they do is kind of benchmark and measure like organisational proficiency, and that actually kind of, being untethered from what's good for people is really what matters. And I think that's a really good point. However, I think like in essence, they're useful tools, as long as you kind of keep in mind that they're tools. They help organisations change. They set a good standard, but don't die on a hill over them. They're simply there as a tool and as a framework. Okay, so we got lots of maturity models and scales and frameworks and tools and all of this kind of great thinking, because that's a lot of clever people who've put a lot of time and effort into creating those tools for us to use. Why is it still so hard? So why is it then in our kind of daily lives as kind of designers within organisations that we're finding things to be such a struggle? And I think it's because despite the rigour of those tools and scales and assessments and models, I think we've missed something. And I think we've missed something really significant. And it's actively working against the outcome that we seek to achieve. So, like all good talks, we've got a list. This list contains some elements of things that you'll find in those maturity models, because I do think there's really good things. As I said, they're useful tools. And it's also contains some kind of elements that I'm bringing to it, which is like my story of as I said earlier, design, my story of growth and becoming more mature in my application of design as I built a design capability within the Home Office. So first, a little bit about me. This is me, about 2013. I think it looks just like me. Everybody please agree. I had some fun with OpenArt AI for this illustration. And actually, I found it really hard to choose. I thought maybe that was quite a good one. Because I like the real dynamism, like I'm gonna, couldn't get it to reproduce the word UX in it, which I kind of wanted. This is like hot UX hero. I'd like her on my team. This is 50s UX hero, kind of a bit sultry, a bit smouldering, and at least had the word UX. This is what happens when you tell the AI to only rely on my description. So clearly, I need to practice. I'm not very good at that. So I ended up staying with this one because I kind of liked how smug her face looks, because that was like, I felt apt. 2013, 2014, about that time, 2015, I was pretty smug. I was a true UX warrior. I was a savior. I was here to change the world, and I was going to save everyone, genuinely. I was a champion of users. I'd recently crossed over from into UX from another discipline, and I'd had that kind of epiphany that a lot of us do when we cross over, which was, wow, I found a career that feels meaningful, that feels worthwhile. And you might say, look, what's the problem with like thinking of yourself as a hero in a situation, right? We do have like wonders. We can work wonders. We can get out into the world and learn about people, and then turn that knowledge and that understanding into better products and services and make people's lives better. So that's quite like heroic, actually. The thing is, I think that it lends itself towards a perspective which can alienate those around us, and actually creates a mindset which works against kind of co-creation and collaboration, and all the things that we say we're trying to achieve. So, but there was a really good reason why I had this mindset as well, right? This is where I worked. I left in 2022. I think it's gotten worse. It's really tough for everybody who's working in that organisation right now. My heart goes out to you all, especially the amazing user-centered design community who are still there doing fantastic work. So it's a challenging department, right? It's got some of the hardest, I think, policy remits around immigration and policing. And I was involved quite early on in doing user research with people who were interacting with the department. So I saw up close what it felt like to interact with the department, how hard it was, and the impact that it was having on people. This was their user-centered design team. There were a couple of contractors being sort of deployed occasionally on things, but broadly this was their approach, and this was how they collected feedback from users. People used to say to us, gosh, when I try to get in touch with the Home Office, it's like screaming into the void. It's like shouting at a blank wall. Nothing comes back. And some of these people that we were including in our interviews and in our usability tests, they were going at an extremely, tense and vulnerable time in their lives, refugees, victims of modern slavery. But even for people who were, highly educated or, pretty privileged, coming from countries where they had English as their first language, they were finding the challenge of interacting and getting through kind of the department's services so hard that they relied on immigration lawyers and immigration experts. So there was a culture of not listening, not wanting to hear, not engaging beyond the absolute minimum that was required for policy development. It's a highly risk-averse department. They're in the news constantly. I understand that, I get it. And to many, they just seemed, super aloof, remote, determined not to invite any criticism, and really keen not to inadvertently make it easier for people to apply for visas. So that's probably why I had this mantle. Is it any wonder that this is how I saw myself at that time? I wore this badge of pride. I was working initially with a team of very committed people. They were experienced in Agile, and I just became more and more convinced that this was how things should be done and the department needed to change. So I set myself the impossible task of changing the Home Office. I don't recommend you do the same, certainly not single-handedly, right? So I'm going to share some of my experiences of what that journey was like, some stuff I got right, and obviously some of the mistakes I made, in the hope that I can help you avoid make the same mistakes. So, back to the list. 1, do your best work. Learn your craft, apply it, develop your methodologies, become expert in your field. As I said, mine is user research. Become expert at that. In 2013, I think it was, 2013, I was a user researcher on one of the GDS Government Transformation Program services. I was on one of those projects. And this was a transformation program that was aimed at transforming 24 of the kind of highest profile government services in the UK. Quite a few of you might be familiar with this slide and this story and this news, but I think an increasingly high number of you may not. It was 11 years ago. I can't quite believe that. So I worked with a team of brilliant, very experienced, talented people, and we used agile methods, and user research and design was fully embedded and into the delivery team, and I loved it. To Coco's talk earlier, I mean, this was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. We made a point of having fun. I like this collection of like random snapshots from the time as we put the service live. I think this was it going into its beta phase, and it was very relaxed. It was a very relaxed afternoon. We turned it on, we watched the numbers go up. It was so different from what I'd seen previously. So yeah, I loved it. I really loved it. We did, like I said, we worked on visas, and I got to do some of the most kind of interesting and compelling user research of my life. This is in Beijing, in China, and we went over there to test a prototype and to observe people applying for tourist visas. And on the first day, we popped in to the visa center where they, the part of the embassy where they process the visas. And this is what we saw. And immediately we knew that, you know, it really didn't matter what happened with the kind of the front end of the application. This is where the real problem lay. And that was my introduction to service design, okay? And the potential that has for radically reshaping hierarchical organizations like the Home Office. And it's a space I'm working in still. This is a Huku book, I hope I've pronounced that right, which is essentially kind of an item that allows you to access healthcare and childcare in your local council, effectively council area. If you don't have that physical thing, artifact, you can't access healthcare, and people are sending that in to their visa as part of their, or were sending that in as part of their visa application process. So if you imagine those piles and piles of things, and what it must be like to be without that really important document. So we were deliberately disruptive and flag waving. I remember this. We were, you know, I wasn't alone. It really felt like the cavalry had arrived. You know, when GDS arrived, it was like, yes, come on. You know, there was this army of us newly into government, and we were charging around telling everybody how important users were. And how they'd gotten it all wrong. And if I'm completely honest, not all of us completely grasped all of it at all times ourselves, but that didn't stop us telling everyone else how to do things and how to change. So a couple of years later, I started out a new role as head of design, head of user research and design was my title at the Home Office. Now, it felt like I'd started that role a little too early. I'd say it's probably quite likely that moving into a leadership role always feels a little bit too early, but genuinely in this instance, it was a bit too early for me. I had loved working with the product team, with the visas team, and I'd loved the disruption and the sense that we were going to change the world. And I probably wasn't quite ready for the step up in maturity that this required. But I had good influences, and I had good instincts, and I had access to really good blogs and people and Twitter. So I had a really good sense that this was an important one. Be diverse in your practice. So diverse teams create better products, wealth of evidence behind that. So find and hire all kinds of people and work on all kinds of problems. So I was hiring a lot. I'd say probably for the first year or so, it was almost all I did was recruitment. And I made a point of hiring as diversely as I possibly could. A really good example of this was we set up an internship program. I think I've seen several people here today who've been through that internship, and that actually swells my heart with pride. It really does, because we had an opportunity with that internship to kind of rethink how we were going to approach the recruitment. Because a majority, you know, the overwhelming majority of people coming through the application process had either recently graduated or had recently graduated from, you know, master's level. When it came to kind of submitting a CV and their application form, there's very little to tell between them. It was really hard to discern between them. So a really bright person in my team came up with the idea of interviewing more people. Let's cast the net wider. And so even though it was much more work for us, that's what we did. We ran I think we interviewed something like 40 or 50% of all the applicants, hundreds applied. And what that did, we didn't know this was going to happen at the time. So this is a little bit of kind of, you know, retrospective thinking. But by casting the net wider, it enabled I guess, more people to get through that might not otherwise have gotten through because of, the inherent bias that kind of operates and runs through any recruitment process, or that we carry around in us as human beings. We studied the numbers after 2 or 3 years, and absolutely blown away by the results. We had on every single factor, we were scoring significantly higher in terms of our diversity from the crop who came through on the internship program, and that has become such an important kind of funnel of a pipeline of talent for the team that's there today. So worked really, really well. Highly recommend it. Bit more work for yourself, but the right thing to do. These are some snapshots from all of the user-centered design UCD community meetups. We would hold them every 2 weeks, and then every month, and then every quarter as we got bigger and bigger. And we had some great names come along and give us talks. And I'm really proud of the really positive community culture that I built at the Home Office, because it was there to sustain people who were then going out and working in really tough environments. Okay. As well as the culture, the kind of pastoral support, we also put in place all the things that a good practice needs. So labs, participant recruitment, help with incentives, design system, an approach to ethics, data protection, training, software and tooling support. I think this is still available on GitHub if you want to take a look. If people are into, I don't know, people making labs anymore, we thought we'd put it up and make it available, but work. So, okay, so this is one I definitely recommend. I know we've heard so much about accessibility today. It's wonderful to see it just like running right through the soul of this conference. Highly recommend this. Build your skills in designing for all kinds of people. People with disabilities, people with low digital skills, older people, people who speak different languages, who come from different cultures and contexts. And the reason for that is not only is it the right thing to do, it also benefits you as a designer and as a researcher. I'm really proud of the way that we focused on so hard on ensuring that we did this well. We really looked at how we can kind of carry out research and design inclusively, and it meant that we were able to create a team now that's focused on accessibility in the department, wrapped into kind of the technology assurance teams at the moment. And they're still there today, and they're doing excellent work. And I'm also, it meant that, as I said, we started to learn about all the different ways that people access the internet, which really benefited our designers when it came to designing the services. We had to raise our game. And so we started to raise awareness across the department. Again, a few more snapshots from some of the awareness raising days we did, and also some of the kind of hands-on training that we were doing for designers and researchers. And researching people with disabilities meant more home visits pre-COVID. And as a result of that, we had to suddenly start considering carrying out research in much more complex environments and contexts with people who are vulnerable, and ensuring that you've got, you think about and consider researcher safety as well. So as a result, we set up an approach to ethics, which I believe was kind of snowballed out into other government departments. It's still there today, and it creates kind of a bedrock foundation for the user research that's done there, but also, and it protects the user researchers, and it also provides a bit of cover for the department as well. And all of this stuff was really good, right? Someone mentioned passports earlier today. All of it, was it Lou, I think, mentioned passports. All of this was really good. So I have no doubt in my mind that kind of really concerted effort to improve the design maturity of the department led to some excellent work on, Home Office services such as this one. So the passport service has been turned around completely. In 2014, there was a huge backlog. It was in the news, dreadful kind of state of affairs, delays. Now you can renew your passport, and it's usually with you in 5 days, which is pretty incredible. When Brexit happened, we were able to run some research. There was an EU ID card service, I think, at the time. Nobody applied for it because they didn't need to. Of course, when the Brexit vote happened and went the way that it did, we saw a spike in people applying for this service. So we took the opportunity to run real-life usability observation, basically, observing people filling out the forms for real, and the longest one took 8 hours. And most of that was them kind of hunting around in their shed or under their bed or wherever it was, trying to find the documents that they were being asked to prove, because the traditional way that policymakers were thinking about when it came to operationalizing their policy was to ask people to provide a load of evidence. And it was because of our research, we showed them this, we played back the findings, we showed them this photo, and because of that, they rethought how they were going to ask people to confirm that they'd been in the UK for the requisite amount of time, and exchanged a piece of data with HMRC. Now, I know, park your thoughts about the policy itself, and obviously I know there were some challenges with actually rolling this service out, but we were able to have a really big impact on that, and I think there was something like 15 to 18 user-centered designers working on the service by the end of it. So I think it takes 15 minutes to kind of run through the application to complete the whole application. It was taking an average of 15 minutes, which is pretty good. So, right, our number one hit. I think last time I was here, I spoke about the accessibility posters. I think they're still available. Our focus on designing for all meant that we ended up creating these posters. A wonderful designer put them on GitHub. They went viral. They were translated into loads of languages. They were even turned into a book. So proud of that. So I was making all this great progress, right, in lots of different environments, on many fronts, making loads and loads of progress in terms of like pushing forward, the design maturity agenda, but something wasn't right. And to explain that, I need to tell you about this one. And to tell you about this one, I need to tell you about, I'll give you an example of me getting it really, really wrong. Be respectful. So around about this time, digital was merging with technology, our remit was increasing, and we were coming into contact with more and more of the technology programs and projects that were being run. And we came up against this kind of issue. Sorry, these are some of the lines taken from some of the maturity models we looked at earlier. And this was kind of what we were coming up against all the time. Me and the heads of profession would discuss it, and it wasn't just UCD folk on Teams. I was coming up against this when I was trying to reach out to senior leaders across the department to persuade them of the value of design. So around about this time, I was asked to get closer to one of the programs, one of the big programs. So it was the one that deals with people crossing the border, and very complex, involves security, offline as well as online. It was huge. And in order to pass their GDS assessment, the head of user research at GDS had told the program director they had to come and talk to me. So I was like, quid's in, I've got power, at last. I'm gonna make some headway, I've got an inroad, and I'm gonna leverage that power. So how did I handle that conversation, do you think? Ta-da! I swooped in, UX hero, with fanfare, music, imagine Star Wars music in the background. It's okay, I'm here to save you, I'm gonna help you. It's all right, I know you've been doing everything wrong, but I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna save you. And I told her all about the resources that I had at her disposal, the accessibility team, assisted digital team, the ethics, the labs, the incentives, the design system. I talked a lot. And I walked away, I was like, that went well. And I was convinced, I'd hear from her imminently. I'd hear from her the next day. Right, see you later. And I never heard from her again. And I emailed her. I even phoned her up. Completely ignored me, totally stonewalled. And the worst of it was that not only did she completely ignore me, because of that behavior, she disengaged from the service assessment entirely, the whole process. So GDS lost the whole thing lost its kind of leverage over her. Not so good, huh? This was like, this is a comedian called Sarah Cooper, which is kind of like what she looked like when I was talking to her. I was trying to find something that sort of represented it. And it wasn't the only time, right, that had happened to me. It happened lots of times, right? I would kind of make all of the efforts, get some time with someone very senior, and then talk at them as the hero, the UX hero. And they would do something akin to this expression. And I didn't know why, and I literally had no plan for what to do about it. So about a year or so later, thereabouts, I got a great new boss. Unfortunately, it wasn't Meryl Streep, but that would be pretty amazing, right? In my mind's eye, Meryl Streep, my new boss, arrives, and after a few weeks, sat me down and gave me some really honest feedback. And the feedback was about how I was perceived amongst the other senior civil servants. Remember, I was senior civil servant. I was like 2 grades below the perm sec. It's quite high up. It's quite dizzy heights up there. And he gave me some very brutal, honest feedback. If I'm honest, it felt quite tough to take at the time. And I really struggled with it. You know what? It was the intervention that I needed. I worked really hard to take it on board and reevaluate how I was approaching things. And I realized that it was, this mindset and my brilliant ideas and everything was all about me, right? I was the UX hero. I was going to save everyone else. No one else knew anything about user-centered design or digital. I knew exactly what they were doing wrong, and I was here to fix it. And I was only concerned with how others should change. And I was frustrated when they wouldn't. I couldn't understand why they just wouldn't. It was obvious. Just do this thing that I'm telling you to do. It's going to work. But of course, people don't work like that. I was alienating the very people that I wanted to influence. So I was running around talking about how I wanted to evangelize user-centered design, and we all were, I didn't notice how weird that made us look. I didn't notice how weird it was that, no other teammates were like running around saying how important our work is, and come let me tell you all about the tasks I do, and we want to have more influence and more say on what's happening. I desperately wanted to be brought into decision-making. I wanted that seat at the table. I wanted to be strategic. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they let us in? We know that our work can be a force for good, right? We want impact, don't we? Ultimately, we know that what we do helps people, right? It helps them achieve their task, apply for their thing, navigate the machine, and it feels like an inherently good thing. That's why I was drawn to this, and it's why many of you were too. The problem is that mindset has fueled a perspective which is in opposition to everyone else in our industry. Right? It leans towards a point of view where we're the educated ones and no one else is. Look how we talk about people. And worse, this is a really lonely place to be. It positions us as like enlightened victims, as if we're passive in all of this. There's nothing we can do. They're the ones that need to change, not us. And my point is, I believe that this mindset is actively working against us achieving our aims, right? So, you don't know everything. Ideologies help no one in practice. Standards are things that we work towards rather than always achieving. So be humble, be pragmatic, be adaptable. What happened to our empathy? I thought we were supposed to be good at this, right? What happened to being human-centered? We're dogmatic instead of pragmatic. We're idealistic instead of realistic. We berate those around us who don't know the terminology, who don't understand what UCD means, or use user testing in the wrong way. Isn't it time we developed a little bit of compassion, a little bit of understanding? Isn't it time we developed some humility? We can't all be designers, right? In most organizations, design decisions are happening everywhere, all the time, and you can't control them all. You can't. We need developers to be specialists at what they do. We need policymakers and business change and BAs to be experts at what they do. And we need to be specialists at what we do. They need us to be specialists at what we do. And we need to work together, right? Collaboration. So this is also about you. Because the thing that's missing from the maturity models and scales and ladders and charts is your design maturity. And by that, I mean your maturity of approach, your maturity, your outlook. So this is about being comfortable with others, having agency within the design process. This is about composure, generosity, respect for those around you. 6, make friends and influence people. Okay, this is nothing new, right? And it's how your work can have greater impact. So there are ways to focus and be really intentional about this. And I'm going to share a couple of things to wrap up. Trust. I've heard the word trust, I don't know, about 15 times today in various talks and events today. Trust, so important. When people trust you, they listen and they respond. They decide to work with you and they take action. They come on your side. In the work that I do right now, I'm involved in kind of digital transformation work right now. This is the single thing that comes up more than anything else, trust. So how do we build trust? Well, luckily enough, some wonderful, bright academics have come up with a formula. It's actually quite good. So if you think about like credibility is like your professional kind of expertise. Can you do what your skill set says you can do? Reliability is, are you dependable? Will you do what you say you do? Intimacy is, what's it like to work with you? And you can score like full marks, 1 to 5. 5 being top, you can score full marks right across the top, but if your self-orientation is too high, people would trust you less. And your self-orientation is people's perceptions of your focus. So do people believe that you care more about your agenda than you do about theirs? Social capital, anyone heard of social capital? Yay, thank you. I first learned about it in my first degree, sociology here in Manchester. It's been really nice to come back. And I was reminded of it by a wonderful leadership coach recently who came to work with me and my team. Social capital is how society works. It's the social, it's the fabric of every social interaction that you have and every relationship that you have. And the good news is that you can think carefully about how you build it and construct it and maintain it in order to build those kind of trusting relationships with people in your teams fast. And not just people in your team, people that in your working environment. And best way to kind of do that, to build the trust and to build out your networks is to listen, the very thing that I didn't do earlier, right? And when I say listen, I mean really listen. Really take the time, really observe, and really show the person that is in front of you that you care. You care genuinely about their world and their problems and what's happening for them. And how do you demonstrate your listening? Ask questions that focus on their world, mirror their body language, mirror their words, reflect back emotional content. Don't assume, check your understanding, summarize to show that you've actually listened. This is like proper hard work listening. If only I knew a discipline that was quite good at this sort of thing. We do have a superpower. Oh my God, who knew? We have an actual superpower. We are experts in this. We do this all the time. We create environments of psychological safety and ask people to tell us honestly how things are for them, including if it's not going well. We're just not using it with the people we work with, or with the senior leaders in our organization, or the people leading programs. Those design maturity models we looked at earlier, they talk about power and impact and measuring progress, how organizations need to change. The design maturity I'm talking about is about confidence, composure, generosity, respect. Because I believe this can be your superpower, and this is how you bring people with you. This is how you land the value of user-centered design and influence what work is done as well as how well work is done. Do you remember this person? So there's a conclusion to the story, because about 3 years later, she joined the team that I was part of, the senior leadership team that I was part of. That was slightly awkward at first, because suddenly we were peers. And I started, when she joined the team, I was now in like full-on listen practice mode. I was like trying to develop and hone these skills. So I was quite different with her, and she opened up quite quickly. I don't know, in a couple of weeks, she suddenly just completely opened up with me, and she said, "Do you know why? Do you know why I never let you, do you know why that happened?" I was like, tell me. And she said, "Because GDS came in and you never backed me up. You threw me under a bus. You were supposed to be in the Home Office. You were supposed to be on my side. And an external organization came in and you just hung me out to dry." I said, "I decided that day I was never going to let you anywhere near my program." And she said, "Now, you're like a completely different person." Of course, I wasn't. I was the same person. I still think all those same things. I still have that passion. I still want to change the world. But my behavior was different. Intentionally different in a way that was focused on ensuring that I could build, a trusting working relationship with somebody based on respect, right? Since then, between this time and the time that I left the department, we made significant strides forward in terms of design maturity in the department. We set up a policy design lab. That's now moved into the strategy department of the organization. It's no longer even in digital data and technology, so it's sitting right up with the strategy folk. We hired principals to work across user-centered design, so they were practitioners at a very, very senior level in the department. We were able to kind of establish the accessibility standard, PS bar, as a core kind of digital data and technology standard. These were kind of really massive steps forward, and I really believe that they were because we changed our mindset, we changed our approach, and we decided to operate with a little bit more humility, respect, and I guess maturity. So, there you go. 6 ways to build your design maturity. 3 you can find in the design and maturity models. The last 3 are the ones that I think will show that you are able to operate at a senior level and will increase the impact that your design prowess deserves. Thank you very much.